So there's big news today. Purdue Pharma, the company that makes OxyContin, is planning to plead guilty to federal criminal charges as part of a settlement of more than $8 billion. Now, this is according to the Justice Department and a report from the Associated Press about the settlement. So in this press release, the company will plead guilty to 3 different criminal counts, including conspiracy and violating anti-kickback laws, according to the officials. Furthermore, the deal, well, it does a lot of things to the company, and as well as making some serious changes to this company, it does not release company executives or owners from any sort of criminal liability. And I think that is relevant and important because right now there's also a criminal investigation going on to the family. So let's get into more detail here. As part of the resolution, Purdue will admit that it impeded the Drug Enforcement Agency by falsely representing that it had maintained an effective program to avoid drug diversion and by reporting misleading information to the agency to boost the company's manufacturing quotas, according to the officials. A Justice Department official also said Purdue had been representing to the DEA that it had, quote-unquote, robust controls to avoid opioid diversion, but instead had been disregarding the red flags to their own systems were sending up. So now you hear the term opioid diversion. What does that actually mean? It basically means that when the legal supply chain of prescription drugs is broken, it results in those drugs being transferred to illicit channels of distribution or usage. So basically, they're admitting to being drug dealers. Well, it's true. That's what they are. This time, they're actually legal drug dealers, though. So now, again, that's got nothing to do with, and I got to stress this, people who legitimately need these drugs for pain management. This is a lot of people that cover this story don't actually talk about those who do use these drugs and do need these drugs just in order to live a normal life. And so free of, or as much as possible free of pain. And so I got to mention that because it is important. And so it is important to be able to have these medications available to people. Okay. That said, right, there are millions of people take these drugs responsibly. They use it to get through their day. And of those people, there's a small amount who do take these drugs irresponsibly, without a prescription, or they do get addicted to them, and some of them overdose. And so there are problems. There's some serious issues, right? So now these companies basically admitted, yeah, well, we allowed these drugs to get diverted to those illicit ends, but we really didn't care because we got paid. We got money. We made a profit. That's it. Their own systems, they ignored that were set up to warn them about this stuff. Again, they completely ignored them and said, not interested. Not interested. Okay? So now these companies, again, didn't care. Now, on that, Purdue will also admit to violating federal anti-kickback laws by paying doctors through a speaking program to induce them to write more prescriptions for the company's opioids and for using electronic health record software to influence the prescription of pain medications, according to officials. So now there's an issue, of course, of overprescription, influencing doctors to write phony scripts that people don't actually need. And so, yes, those are crimes. Again, there are people who legitimately need these drugs, and they provide a stable market, but it wasn't enough to Purdue. They got greedy. They decided they wanted to chase after even more profit. Of course. Now, as part of the plea deal, the company admitted that it violated federal law and knowingly and intentionally conspired and agreed with others to aid and abet the dispensing of medication from doctors without a legitimate medical purpose and outside the usual course of professional practice, according to a copy of the plea agreement obtained by the Associated Press. Their punishment for this is as follows. Purdue will first make a direct payment to the government of about $225 million, which is part of a larger $2 billion criminal forfeiture. In addition to that, Purdue also faces a $3.54 billion criminal fine, of which they're likely not to pay the whole thing, because a lot of that's going to end up going to creditors that they owe. Purdue will also agree to a $2.8 billion in damages to resolve civil liability. And finally, it would transform into what they call a public benefit company, meaning it would be governed by a trust that is to balance the trust's interest against those of the American public and public health. And so that is interesting. I've never seen that before. But as you're going to see, there's a lot of people that are not happy about this. But first, let's get to the Sackler family. So the Sackler family, of course, owns Purdue Pharma and basically runs it. They got a lot of money off of this. And so what happens to them? Well, the Sacklers would not be involved in this new company. And part of the money from the settlement would go to aid medically assisted treatment and other drug programs to combat the opioid epidemic. And so, look, I don't know really anything else that involves the Sacklers. Right now, no criminal charges against the family. But then again, there is an investigation that is pending about them. Now, the arrangement mirrors a key element of the company's proposal to settle about 3,000 lawsuits filed by state, local, and Native American tribal governments. And so, basically, that's the deal. They pay fines, the company gets handed over, and I guess they get to declare bankruptcy as well. Not exactly the strongest settlement. So now, again, let's go to the people that are not thrilled with this. State attorneys general and Democratic members of Congress and advocates pushed back on this. They wrote a letter to Attorney General William Barr saying that the deal does not hold the Sackler family accountable for this. Quote, if the only practical consequence of your department's investigation is that a handful of billionaires are made slightly less rich, we fear that the American people will lose faith in the ability of the department to provide accountability and equal justice under the law. Now, that was signed by 38 members of the Democratic Party in Congress. Why there were not more Democrats involved, well, I think we know. Pharmaceutical companies actually lobby the Democratic Party extensively. They lobby Congress extensively. And I can almost make a guess of who some of these people are that have signed onto this letter. I can almost hear AOC and Bernie Sanders. I'm not entirely sure, but from the way it's written, I mean, come on. But here's the thing. I'm actually shocked that the Justice Department under Trump did anything. I mean, maybe it's because it's affecting white people in the Midwest. And let's be honest, that's a lot. I mean, that's a big part of the reason, I should say. They really weren't worried when there was drugs in the inner city. No, in fact, what they did when there were drugs in the inner city is that they didn't go after the drug companies, right? They didn't go after the people that introduced crack into those neighborhoods. No, they went and beefed up law enforcement. In this case, they actually did go after a corporation with a pretty mild punishment. And so, again, I say it's a mild punishment because I would actually do quite a bit more. Now, with that said, the Sackler family pledged to hand over the company itself, plus at least $3 billion to resolve thousands of suits against the company. But the company, not the family, did declare bankruptcy as a way to work around that plan, which could be worth about $10 billion over time. Now, about half the states so far oppose this settlement and wrote Barr to ask him not to make a federal deal that involves converting Purdue into a public benefit corporation. They say that it would be wrong for the government to rely on earnings from the sale of more OxyContin, and they do have a point. So what would I do? I'd nationalize the company and make it not for profit. So, that nice company you got there, it's ours now. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to make it a not-for-profit entity. That's what we're going to do. And I think that, look, all these pharmaceutical companies should operate at least as a not-for-profit entity. I mean, you could keep it private, but it would have to be not-for-profit. Because understand, I think that it's wrong to have a profit motive in healthcare, in medicine. These medicines are to save people's lives, not for you to make a buck off of, and not for you to jack up the price so that people can't afford it, so that you can be highwaymen and say, oh, hey, your money or your life. I don't feel comfortable with that. I know there's some people like, but then what incentive are they going to have to innovate these drugs? For one, not a lot of money that goes into innovation of certain drugs. But at the same time, a lot of public money does go into that through the use of the university system. And so universities are actually some of the biggest places that actually perpetuate real research and development into some of these drugs. And so I feel like it would be better to either nationalize a lot of these companies or at least make sure that they are not-for-profit entities, that they can pay enough, their researchers and staffers to be able to research these drugs, but not be able to make obscene amounts of profit on it. And so there's that. Okay. Now, I also believe that the Sackler family or anybody involved in this should face criminal penalties, criminal prosecution, because these are the people that basically profited off the suffering of hundreds of thousands of Americans. And I understand, and it is important to point out that this drug has OxyContin and fentanyl and some of these other pain management drugs have helped a lot of people as well, right? And it's helped them to manage pain and to try to live, something akin to a normal life. And I understand that. That's why you have to have some of these drugs available and a company out there to actually, be able to manufacture it and distribute it. So that's why, again, I would keep a company around after nationalizing it and making it not for profit. But it's important to point that out, okay? You've got to make sure that these people have drugs that are available as well and that are well regulated. Obviously, something like that's not going to happen under a Donald Trump administration. It's not going to happen under a Biden-Harris administration either. And I don't see them actually being tough on these corporations as well. But, at least there's something. And I'm very, very surprised to see that there was some sort of, punishment for this company, as meager as it is, $8 billion. Still, it's a lot more than I actually expected. Weirdly enough. That just shows, though, that I've got a real low bar when it comes to the Trump administration. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.